Welcome, everyone, to our brand new podcast called Getting Deep with a PhD and a JD.
Hey,
Hi, everyone.
welcome to our Halloween episode where we have risen to the occasion and dressed in costume. I am Edwina Scissorhands.
Don't cut your face. Don't cut your face
Oh,
off.
oh, oh,
And I guess I'm spider person or spider woman. I have a little spider here and I have my little spider wig, multiple colors on. So we're in the mood, little spooky, spectacular Halloween event for us.
Yes,
And
very fun.
so, Kimmy, of course, we have to start with our question. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, what is supposedly the most haunted place in the United States?
That would be New Orleans, baby.
Woo!
New Orleans, Louisiana. That's where our people are from, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily New Orleans, but
No, we have people from New Orleans.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Baton
true.
Rouge, Pointe-Coupet,
hmm
Plaquemine. Yeah, lots of
hmm
places.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the
in
places.
Louisiana, all the
Yes.
places. Yep. Yep.
So I took a look at some of the history, and I might have to take one of my scissor hands off, so I can navigate my research here. But yeah, so I did some research into why is New Orleans, and it's specifically New Orleans so far as being the most spooky city in the United States. That's what the city is lauded to be. And there's a couple of reasons why New Orleans is considered the most haunted city in history or in the United States. One of the reasons that I found was the yellow fever epidemic, interestingly enough, which it so essentially the yellow fever was a mosquito-borne virus. And individuals were infected when they were bitten by a mosquito that carried the virus. So it was easy for multiple people in a household to succumb to the disease and end up suffering from liver and kidney failure, hemorrhaging, seizures, coma, and then ultimately death. And so some of the records indicate that 41,000 people died from yellow fever in the 19th and early 20th century. And a lot of people, because of that, during the summer would leave New Orleans. But if they, for the people who stayed, 1 out of every 10 people who stayed would die from yellow fever. And they would have these corpse wagons that would come around neighborhoods and call out to different families and households to bring out their dead. And these people were buried, in mass graves that surrounded the city. So that's one reason. And of course, when we're talking about burial in New Orleans, a lot of the tombs and caskets and all of those are above ground. So, and I was reading that the myth, and this one article called it a myth. I don't know if it really is a myth, but the myth was that because New Orleans has a high water table, that was one of the reasons why people would get buried, above ground, because it's below sea level.
Because you couldn't. Yeah.
But then there are other opinions that the reason that people are buried above ground is because that was the norm in French and Spanish society, that it was just the norm, and that's why it continued. And so I think it's both.
Yeah, and also I remember my mother telling me the story of a hurricane or tornado,
Mhm.
some type of storm that hit.
Mhm.
And she said that she had heard that like there were some people that were first buried under the ground a little bit, and then when this storm hit, like the caskets came up and they were transported, down the street. And then so she was telling me, and I don't know when, I can't remember all the details and like when she said this, but she said that it was a story that had been passed down. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking that there may have been somewhere,
Yeah.
sometime where people did try to bury under the ground where they realized that they couldn't, you know.
Mhm. Mhm. So that's why, in my opinion, I think it's a combination of the two. And then um, one of one of the other reason that is cited in a lot of articles that I've um, researched was the LaLaurie Mansion.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So why don't you kind of go into the details of the LaLaurie Mansion and why that's
Yeah.
another one of the major reasons why um, New Orleans is known as the most haunted city.
Yeah, the LaLaurie Mansion is actually a very tragic situation, very tragic place. Delphine LaLaurie was a woman who lived in Louisiana. I believe she was born around 1807, I believe. And she was married at a very young age, at 14. She had three husbands. And so by the time she had her third husband, she was pretty wealthy and, had been married for having those three husbands. So she'd pretty much been um, really forced to grow up really, really quickly because she was married so young. And what they found is that the key event that really exposed everything was a fire that happened in 1834. And what happened is there was this fire in her mansion, in her house, and in order to get in and make sure that everybody was out of the house, the authorities said, let us into this room, this room at the top. And she and her husband did not want to let people into the room. So they actually broke in. And when they broke in, people were horrified. They were horrified. They found a group of Black enslaved folks whose bodies had been tortured. They were hanging from their necks. Their limbs had been, according to reports, had been grotesquely stretched. Um, and
Yeah.
in reading, and I saw some other things where they said that they had like flayed, when you take and you peel the skin off, like there are people who had skin pulled off, there were people who had holes drilled in their heads. It was almost as if someone was experimenting on folks. And so when this happened, and these were enslaved, these were her slaves. So when this
Hmm.
happened, the community found out about it and they became enraged because New Orleans did have rules. They had one rule that you could not give um, cruel and unusual punishment
I was
to
surprised by that.
enslaved folks, which was very surprising to me. And it was very surprising because the community became so enraged that it was like a mob that just went to her house and just started breaking and tearing up things.
Mm.
And she actually escaped. One of her, they said it was the carriage driver. Now, some reports say it was an enslaved person who was the carriage driver, and some reports, were really kind of iffy on that. But someone helped to usher her out of town, and so she was able to leave New Orleans and actually move and actually go to Paris.
Mm.
And so, uh, but so there were some really interesting things. People knew that she had been abusing slaves, the enslaved
Mhm.
folks. People knew because there are letters where people, would discuss how she was so cruel. Um, According to some of the letters, she would have her cook chained to her stove. And one of the accounts that I saw, the account said that the cook was actually starving,
Mm.
and supposedly the cook is the one who started the fire
Mhm. Mhm.
because the cook the cook, according to reports, wanted to die, was ready to die, and wanted to expose everything that had happened there.
At the same time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and when they went into the house, also they looked at the property, and there were all of these bones and human remains found on the property. So clearly, this woman had been doing this for a significant period of time. And you would think, okay, well, was her husband complicit? Well, she and her husband were actually living in separate places. And they were, according to neighbors, they were just they would fight each other. And so
Hmm.
they lived in separate places. But when they contacted the husband to try to figure out how to get into the room that was clearly locked, he said, you all need to mind your own business or stay out of the affairs of others. So clearly he must have known that something was going on and that his wife was cruel,
Mhm.
and was torturing
I think it's
people.
interesting, even a topic like this, right? It always links back or relates back to slavery.
Yeah.
I mean, everything in this country is somehow touched, infected by the institution of slavery. And of course, I guess from that is, okay, all of the souls of the people that she, tortured is what's, haunting that mansion, right? And
Yeah,
so,
and I actually saw that. Okay, so some people, they have a lot of different tours in Louisiana. And so some people will say it's the souls of the people who were tortured and murdered, because
yeah,
that's what
they
happened.
were murdered.
But
Yeah.
also some people will say that it is Delphine LaRue,
Mm-hmm.
her,
LaLaurie.
LaLaurie, sorry, LaLaurie,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that it's actually her that is
Oh,
haunting the
interesting.
place. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. So I did read that some
Mm-hmm.
people, question. And also, I don't know if you watch American Horror Story,
No, I
but
don't.
there is a I remember one of the seasons they had a person who was torturing her enslaved folks, and it was the one that had witches in it, and it was loosely based on the LaLaurie mansion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's in
Interesting.
popular culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I,
it's oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to kind of segue into something else. So if you wanted to say something more about that, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I was gonna underscore something that we mentioned before about the rule about the they could not have cruel and unusual punishment with
Hmm.
slaves.
Yeah.
And I was just gonna mention that again because that is so just contradictory
To the
to
institution
the
itself,
institution. I mean, you have people who are completely enslaved, and then you have a law that says that you can't have
that you
cruel and
can't be
unusual.
cruel.
Cruel. Yeah. So, and how angry the community became when they found out what she was doing, and how
Yes.
the
I mean,
mob.
the mindset that I think of that situation is, yeah, you want slaves, but you want them to be able to work.
Yeah.
You want them to be able to work for free.
Right.
So I can understand the sort of backwards thought process in that of, yes, we can enslave people, but you can't be cruel because then the enslaved people can't benefit us the way we need them to
Right.
benefit us. So yeah, those were slaves that we could have used on our properties to
Yeah.
continue to help build our wealth and to work on our fields, work on building our architecture, all of the things.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, I think that's probably the source of their anger. It definitely, I would be surprised if it was a humanitarian anger. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, it couldn't. I would have a really hard time believing that it was based on their true welfare,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
their well-being. Because if it really was, you wouldn't have slaves. You
You
would say this is an inhumane institution, and we're
in
not
it
going to have it.
in and
Yeah.
of itself,
Right.
exactly. So
Right.
that's a very interesting tidbit that I'm glad we're highlighting and pointing out. Did you ever see the movie The Skeleton Key?
Yes, but I don't think I remember it. Is that the one where there was a kind of a chant on a record that?
Yeah, there was a
Okay.
record involved, and
Okay,
so
I do. Then I did. Yeah, then I do remember.
so that movie, that's one of the other reasons that I think that people consider New Orleans and just Louisiana as a whole as haunted and spooky and all the things is because of this idea of voodoo, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the Skeleton Key, but then there's also that connection with slavery. Because
Right.
in the Skeleton Key, that's what it was about. It was
Yeah.
about slaves who had used voodoo to get out of their situation as slaves, and they switched souls with the white masters of their house,
Oh, yes,
and
I do remember it
and
now. I do remember it.
they had to
Yeah.
keep switching souls because they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to continue to live and all that
Live.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very, very, very interesting. So voodoo, right? So that's the elephant in the room. It's what a lot of people talk about. I know as a child growing up, I was made to believe that it was just in and of itself this evil thing, that it went against Catholicism, and and what I've found in my research in preparation for our episode today is that it actually wasn't that at all. So one of the queens of voodoo, Marie Laveau, was known to practice voodoo, right? And and every article that I would look or find about her, what was interesting to me was a lot of the characteristics that described who she was very humanitarian, in
Yeah.
the sense that
Yeah.
she would take in people, she would help people who were ill. Um, she was very much the sort of
She was a
keeper,
healer.
a
She was a
healer.
healer. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
and she was very giving, actually, is what I've read about her. And so I'm like, wait a minute, okay, when am I going to find the articles about her voodoo? Like, where is that? But that was actually what it is. And so essentially, what it is that voodoo is this um it's a combination, it's a hybrid, right?
Yeah.
Especially, at least New Orleans
It's a
voodoo.
spirituality that
That's
derives from.
combined with Catholicism, and
Yeah.
it's derived from traditional religions in Africa, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And so what people did was, in order for them to continue to practice their spirituality that they were, had been growing up with, and it's based in that the connection with ancestors, connection
Yes.
with the spirit world. They cloaked it in Catholicism to so that the majority would think that, okay, yeah, they are practicing Catholicism, but not
Catholicism.
really.
Yeah. Yeah. Because our family's from Louisiana, and our family grew up Catholic.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to me. And our grandfather, his whole
hmm
his whole family was Catholic, and
Yeah.
it was just really interesting. So when I was younger, I would ask my mom about voodoo. Mom, do we have people in our family who practice voodoo? Do we have a connection? And my mother was always very clear to say no, 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 absolutely not.
Right.
It wasn't until I started looking at genealogy
hmm
and looking at newspaper articles and finding things. And I did find an article where one of our ancestors was, and I, they used the term, he was with this other person, they used the term witch doctor.
hmm
And the way I found the article was that he was, either being sued, or there was some kind of legal action being taken against him, because supposedly he and this other man were supposed to guarantee that either this woman's husband was going to be a good husband to her, and that didn't happen, so she actually brought suit
hmm
for false advertising. So there were some
hmm
there were some things, and they talked about how they were trying to find this other man, and these are the two names. And
hmm
oh, wow, this
hmm
is really fascinating,
hmm
so
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of fear and a lot of sometimes embarrassment, when people think about things. But I say, I really want us to understand our ancestors,
Yes.
and
And
what
they had
what
their own
they
religions.
had their own religions and they had their
Yeah.
own beliefs.
Yeah.
And whether we support those beliefs or not, they
Hmm.
still had those beliefs, and those beliefs sustained them and did something to help them
Yes.
progress.
Yes.
So
To be
yeah,
stewards of their communities,
yeah,
to make connections, the understanding that the world does not, just consist of them, maybe, so because that's really what most religions are about, including those religions that we don't know a lot about and have certain belief systems that are unfamiliar to us, foreign to us. And yeah, and also can bring about this level of fear, mainly because you don't know about it.
right, right,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think as we one of the reasons that I think Louisiana and New Orleans in particular really is seen as being spooky is because you had so many cultures coming together.
Yeah.
You had the indigenous folks who were
Yes.
already there.
The Native Americans.
Yes,
Yes.
you
Hmm.
had folks coming from Africa who were slaves.
Right.
You had the French, you had the
The
Spanish
Spanish.
folks.
Hmm.
Who else? Oh, you had Italians. We have
Yeah.
Italian
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
in our family.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, you just had so many people, and they created this culture, and that's why we have the terms Creole,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
it talks about the culture, and so you have Creole languages
Hmm.
too that
Yeah.
evolved because of the
Yeah.
different mixings, and because of that, different people borrowed from different religious and spiritual traditions, and
Hmm.
it just makes it, because there's so many different people, and people sometimes fear what they don't understand or they
Yeah.
don't know, then it just has this air of strangeness and about it.
Because do you remember? I don't know if you saw this, but um, Beyonce, when she did her Black is King project, and she came out with this whole like movie like of all of the videos associated with each song
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that. And I remember after watching it, people already want to say that she's a devil, right? Because she's so popular. People already say that. So I know some people were saying that after they saw that, because she infused a lot of entertainers from Africa. So it was
Hmm.
heavily, African based music. And of course the videos, were in line with that. And there was imagery
Uh-huh.
that she included in there, and people were like, "Oh, that's the devil, that's the devil." And then I remember,
Illuminati.
yeah, not even the Illuminati. I mean, they already say that, but I'm saying people were specifically saying that this was evil and it was
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
devil and all this other kind of stuff. And then I remember there were a couple of op-ed pieces that came out after that, and they were just like, "No, you really need to educate yourselves, because a lot of that imagery comes from African spirituality and African, religions that
Right,
that
right.
they practice,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
it doesn't have anything to do with the devil.
Yeah.
And just like with anything else, you always have someone that can use it for bad things, or
Yeah.
whatever you want to say. So just like with it, anything else, that's the case with voodoo and um the Santeria and all those things that are outside of our norm, three major religions that we have in the world. So very interesting. And so yeah, that all contributes to the mystique that is New Orleans and
Orleans, yeah.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway? What's the call to action in this for this topic?
So I think the call to action is really to educate yourselves about these different things that have happened in our history, and it's our shared history. And so, like Delphine LaLaurie, very tragic event. And what's happened is people have taken this event and they've put it in popular culture. And so
Romanticized it.
they've romanticized it,
Yeah.
they've made this person seem kind of like a folk hero. And so
Hmm.
it's really easy to forget about the torture
Yeah.
and the pain. And I mean, I just can't imagine being, first of all, being an enslaved person and then being an enslaved person that is found hanging from your neck and having like all these things happen to your body. I can't imagine that. And I think that it if we don't remember these
Hmm.
things and if we don't say, okay, we want to know, we want to go back and look at some firsthand reporting, then we run the risk of romanticizing this. And once
Hmm.
that happens, then people forget how bad these things were. And when you do that, then you open the door to things being repeated.
Repeated. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I agree with you on that. And knowledge is power. I think knowledge is enlightening. Um, Knowledge decreases um, the tendency to judge.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a call to action is to educate yourself. Don't just believe everything that you hear another person saying, even us. I mean, go and research what these
Yeah.
topics
Yeah.
that we're bringing up to you. Research what we're saying, and arm yourself with accurate information, so that you do not fall into the trap of judging another culture, another religion, or whatever it is. And I think this is yet another example of that. And yeah, I mean, yeah. So knowledge is definitely power. Knowledge is key.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
So good. I
Yeah.
think this was an interesting episode. You got a different look
I
from us.
know.
That's always fun.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
and we are Scissor Hands and Spider Lady, Spider Woman.
Spider Woman, yeah. So, as usual, comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what you think about this topic. Do you like the fact that we kind of switched it up and got a little more fun, a little less serious? At least, in certain ways.
In certain ways, yeah.
We're always gonna bring you the deep. We're always gonna do that. But we like to kind of do it in a fun way, in any way we can. So, like, comment, subscribe.
Absolutely. And definitely let us know additional topics that you would like for us to talk about. We want to hear what you want to hear about. We love researching and thinking about new topics, so let us know.
Absolutely. All right. So, bye for now.
Cut in the face, cut in the face. Bye.